Joining us today, I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here's what's coming up on the program. The world reacts to U.S. President Donald Trump's announcement of at least 10% tariffs on countries. The new Commonwealth Secretary General, Shirley Botchway, pledges to advance existing values in the organization. Plus, 15-year-old Kanyeachuku Tagbo Okeke sets a new Guinness World Record for making the largest painting on canvas. Let's begin the world today. The whole world has heard by now U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs imposed on them to bridge the trade deficit with the United States. Trump announced 10% tariffs on most countries, including the U.K., from Saturday, with higher duties on some of America's biggest partners from April 9th. This morning, Trump posted on social media, "The operation is over. The patient lived and is healing. The prognosis is that the patients will be far stronger, better, bigger and more resilient than ever before." And roughly 60 countries deemed the worst offenders for unfair trade practices by the U.S. have each received a higher and individual tariff rate that the EU gets 20%, China gets 54%, which includes earlier tariffs. Japan gets 24%, and all this begins on April 9th. Now, China's promised resolute countermeasures, and the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer says a trade war is not in the interest of the United Kingdom. Intention, he says, is to secure a deal with the US. He also says nothing is off the table at this point. There have been more reactions from around the world. The French Prime Minister, François Bayrou, says the tariffs have created a catastrophe for both France and the U.S. Germany's Finance Minister, Georges Cukierman, says negotiations are still on the table. Norway will be negotiating, as well as Thailand, which is sending officials to talks in the U.S. Trump says he gave China just 34% tariff versus 67% the other way. Also for the EU, he says he gave 20% tariff, which is essentially half of what he intended.
If you look at that, China, first row, China, 67%. That's tariffs charged to the USA, including currency manipulation and trade barriers. So 67%, I think you can, for the most part, see it. Those with good eyes, with bad eyes. We didn't want to bring, it's very windy out here, we didn't want to bring out the big charts because it had no chance of standing. Fortunately, we came armed with a little smaller chart. So it's 67%, so we're going to be charging a discounted reciprocal tariff of 34%. I think, in other words, they charge us, we charge them less, so how can anybody be upset? They will be, because we never charge anybody anything, but now we're going to charge. European Union, they're very tough, very, very tough traders. You know, you think of European Union, very friendly. They rip us off. It's so sad to see. It's so pathetic. 39%, we're going to charge them 20%, so we're charging them essentially half.
Now, interestingly, Nigeria also received a slam of 14% tariff as announced by the U.S. President Donald Trump. The newly introduced 14% tariff marks a significant shift in U.S.-Nigeria trade relations, with the U.S. government citing an ongoing trade imbalance. According to the Trump administration, Nigeria imposes a 27% tariff on U.S. exports. That's a disparity the U.S. claims has long been detrimental to American businesses and consumers. In response, the U.S. has now imposed a new tariff on Nigerian exports to mitigate what they argue is an unfair trade arrangement. So the impact of these tariffs on the world economy will be huge. They can only be measured by the lines on a chart of U.S. tariff revenue jumping to levels not seen in a century, beyond those seen during the high protectionism of the 1930s, or in the overnight stock market falls, especially in Asia. A true measure of these changes will be significant to long-standing global avenues of trade. At the heart of this is the universal tariff of 10% on all imports imports into the U.S. for everyone coming in on Friday night. On top of that, dozens of worst offenders will be charged reciprocally for having trade surpluses. The tariffs on Asian nations are truly remarkable, and they will break the business models of thousands of companies, factories, and possibly entire nations. Some of the supply chains created by the world's biggest companies will be broken instantly. The inevitable impact will surely be to push them towards China. I want to bring in now developmental economist Chioma Onyema. She joins us from Chiang Mai in Thailand. Chioma, thank you for joining us on the program today. I know it's kind of pretty.
Thank you for having.
Yeah.
Hello.
Right.
Thank you for having me, Amarachi.
It's great to have you. Wish we could see you as well. I know it's pretty late where you are, and I really appreciate you talking to us at this time. Has the Trump announcement been as upsetting as expected?
Yes, it has. Well, they expected something lower. They knew he was going to impose tariffs, but they didn't know it was going to be this much. They didn't know it was going to be this high. So it hasn't been what they expected. It's way bigger than they expected. But most of the Southeast Asian countries are not saying anything now. They're calling for negotiations.
Yeah, a lot of them are calling for negotiations, but it's been hours now, since President Trump made the announcement of the tariffs. What other reactions are there? I mean, Thailand says it's sending officials to the U.S. to have talks with President Trump. We know that there were a lot of, many of these requests even before the tariffs were announced. What other measures are they taking apart from retaliation and seeking negotiations with the U.S.?
I think for now, they're holding talks internally. They're trying to find out other measures that they can take, because these are countries that are not very high up when it comes to development. And they can't actually balance the trade deficits easily, because what they have, the difference is very high. And because the tariffs have been imposed on almost all Asian countries that trades with US and has a trade deficit, they can't really say, let them find another partner, trading partner to move their goods to in the short term. So for now, they are discussing internally. Nothing has been said officially, especially for the Southeast Asian economies. For some countries like China and Vietnam, they said they will retaliate.
Now, I see here that, the new tariffs affect mainly Southeast Asian countries, China getting 34%, Vietnam 46%. In fact, most of the countries which have been slammed the highest tariffs are in Southeast Asia. Trump says these countries have been ripping America off, but this imbalance of trade deficit that he's complaining about was all caused by the United States, even if the agreements were not made under President Trump.
Yes, they were caused by the United States through their relocating, offshoring their manufacturing and productive activities because of cheaper labor in the Southeast Asian economies. It was much easier for them to produce here and send it back to the US. And then the cost of labor in the US is very high. So you can't really blame them. And then when it comes to exporting and importing, trade generally in Southeast Asia, here is a manufacturing hub. Here, generally everywhere around here, from the China Plus strategy, it has helped turn the other countries around Southeast Asia into a manufacturing hub. So there isn't much you expect them to do for now, because, for instance, some of them China used to pass some of its trade through Vietnam or through Cambodia. But right now, with the tariff, it's no longer cheap for them to do so. So for now, I think the discussions are going on internally to know what they can come up with. But I really don't know what a country like Cambodia or Laos can offer to China to US to balance this trade deficit.
And when they're talking about retaliatory tariffs, how soon could that take effect? I mean, the countries that are talking about it, China and the rest of them, the U.S. has given a timeline when these tariffs come to effect, latest by Friday for some countries and by April 9th for others. But for those in Southeast Asia where you are, when do their own tariffs come into effect?
That's something that we cannot say. You know, generally the government here is not being open with regards to certain foreign policies. So when it comes to giving a timeline to their remarks, I'm not in a position to say. I'm not inside the government, but they said, especially South Korea and China, they said they will retaliate. That's what I know. They said they will retaliate. But for the others, the Southeast Asian economies, nobody has said anything. Not necessarily. I think they don't really want to, you know, will I say that distort the trade, the diplomatic relations the more, or make it deteriorate. But they've not said anything for now, because I think that they don't have much negotiating power with regards to what is going on. U.S. is a major trade partner, and most of their exports go to U.S. So right now, they don't have much negotiating power, and I think what they want to do is to discuss in-house and know what best policy to follow up on with this.
So from what I understand, the U.S. president wants to get labor and manufacturing of American products back into the U.S. But can the U.S. government keep up with the labor and production costs? It seems that many of these countries do not fall under the 3% who are made up of his billionaire friends?
Well, for now, what I can say is, I think on the short run, or rather in the short run, there's going to be an inflation in the U.S. with this announcement, because for goods that have substitutes, U.S. can produce, and then with the tariffs, if they are able to produce it at lower cost than the cost with the tariffs, definitely in the long run, there's going to be more revenue for companies as well as more jobs. But if those goods cannot be easily substituted and they still have to import them, it's going to cause an inflation. With regards to goods if at the end of the day, they still produce, but because of the cost of labor, their cost of production is still higher than what the tariff would have given them, then there's going to be an inflation. I don't know how they're going to get out of this. But with inflation, there's going to be an inflation. That's just the first thing that's going to happen. But if they're able to expand their production and bring back the jobs back home with this tariff, then in the long run, more jobs will be created. But immediately, on the short run, there's going to be an inflation, but there's also going to be more revenue for the U.S. government.
So in other words, even in the U.S., the so-called advantages, of slamming these tariffs will not be seen in the short run, probably towards the end of Trump's administration, you think?
Maybe, depending on how fast the manufacturers and producers are able to go into production and substitute what is being produced or what is being imported. But if they're not able to do that fast, the length of time it will take them to adjust to this shock. That's how long it's going to take them to come out of the inflation. But if, for instance, they are not able to get substitutes, or even if they get substitutes, the cost of production due to labor costs in the U.S. is still higher than what the tariff cost, the cost of the tariff, then definitely there's still going to be an inflation. So it all depends on how long this takes for the internal workings of manufacturing firms and industries in the U.S. are able to adjust as soon as possible. I can't predict, because I am not, there are a lot of companies involved, there are a lot of sectors involved, there are a lot of industries involved. So I can't give any particular timeline to this.
Right, and I know that Thailand is not on this list, but they will still be impacted by the tariffs, right?
Thailand it got a 37% tariff increase. And the Prime Minister, Paetongtarn Shinawatra, is actually calling for negotiations. So it was slammed with the tariff as well. 37%.
Indeed. And how are people reacting to that? I mean, is this something, they expected, like the rest of the world? I mean, the U.S. president had been touting this for weeks. So a lot of people were on edge yesterday, just waiting for that announcement.
I think the tariff was expected, yes, because the prime minister said what they expected was around 11%, but it went higher than that. So everywhere for right now is a bit quiet. Nothing is really being said apart from just analysts discussing, but official government announcements or policies have not come out. We haven't really had much. What we just know is that said we want to call for negotiations. Nobody is really saying anything about retaliatory tariffs or retaliatory policies here in Thailand. I think because of the power the imbalance of power here and negotiated power, most of those countries are not saying, especially in Southeast Asia, they're not saying much. They would rather want to have negotiations. So it's affecting the economy generally. It's been projected to affect the economy because right now Vietnamese stock index has dipped by about 6.7%, and the Thai's projected growth rates of their GDP is projected to contract, is at risk of contraction of about 3%. So definitely things are happening, but we haven't had any official or public policy on what the next move is going to be apart from negotiations.
Well, I guess we'll start seeing the impacts in the next few days, maybe when you take a trip to the markets or, try to check out certain goods, you'll probably notice the difference. But I wanted you to speak to, about Nigeria and the 14% tariff that's been slammed on goods, according to the U.S., that this will help level up the 27% tariff that Nigeria already imposes on U.S. goods. You know that there already exists a disparity in exchange rate. How will businesses survive in Nigeria?
This is definitely going to affect the Nigerian market because we have a lot of goods imported from the U.S. I know that our major trade partners are not, it's mainly China, but we have some goods that are imported from the US. And so definitely the tariff is going to affect, it's going to impact on the inflation that is already happening in Nigeria. And I don't know how we're going to balance it. Do we export more of our crude oil to the US to balance the trade? Because he mentioned that one of the issues was the trade deficits, apart from other protectionist policies or probably other diplomatic relation issues. But it's going to affect Nigeria in terms of inflation. Those items that we import from the US are definitely going to increase in prices. And that is something that everybody needs to be aware of. I think in a few months, it will be evident in the markets in Nigeria.
Chuma, can you hazard a guess if the U.S. economy will survive this tariff regime, especially when the retaliatory tariffs kick in?
Right now, nobody can say exactly what the long-term outlook is going to be. In the short run, everybody's expecting inflation because tariffs are basically paid either by the manufacturing companies, that is, if it hits their profits, or the citizens get to pay higher when they go to pay for goods and services. The consumer, the end consumer gets to pay higher. So there's going to be an inflation, but how long it's going to last, we don't know. What is going to be the end goal, we don't really know. I can't say for sure what is going to happen because a lot of countries are yet to say what their next policy is going to be. Some are saying, okay, we want to go into discussions, like UK wants to go into discussion, Vietnam wants to go into discussion, Thailand wants to go into discussion. Other countries are saying, oh, we're going to retaliate. China is saying we're going to retaliate. South Korea is saying we're going to retaliate. So the policy that those countries impose will determine what's going to be the long-term effect on US and if they're going to be able to come out of it. But for now, there's going to be an inflation. And it's going to affect trade generally. Global supply chains are going to be affected. Different sectors of the economy are going to be affected globally, not just in the US, just because the tariffs were imposed on different sectors and different economies in different regions of the world.
Right, Choma, thank you so much. Appreciate your thoughts and analysis, on this issue, reaching out to you for more. Unfortunately, we couldn't see your face today. We're looking forward to, really getting the full import of what you were saying. But thanks again for joining us on the program.
Thank you. Have a lovely evening.
We're staying with Trump's announcement of tariffs across the world. Senior White House figures held a discussion in Chicago on Wednesday about the significance of the president's Liberation Day tariffs, which include a baseline 10% tariff on imports from most countries except Canada and Mexico, and special reciprocal tariffs on others, as well as a blanket 25% on foreign-made cars. Now, Stephen Miller, Deputy Chief of Staff of the White House, explained the tariff on each country is based on the graveness of the severe misconduct they're alleged to have used in their trade relations with the U.S. He cited the example of an assembly line between China and Vietnam, stressing that Washington will clamp down on countries shipping products through a third party to avoid tariffs. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, meanwhile, urged the American public to be cautious of the lies spread by the media, which she accused of stirring up fear.
The announcement today is the most significant action on global trade policy that has taken place in our lifetimes. It's not even a close call. This is probably the biggest event that's happened on global trade since the very ill-fated decision that we are now reversing of knocking down all of America's trade tariffs and revenue policies that led to the offshoring and outsourcing of all of our industry. So this is the great reversal of that great betrayal, is how I would look at it. And so what he's doing today is, for the first time ever, he's saying that if you have stolen our jobs and therefore threatened our national security, we will apply a reciprocal tariff based on the degree of your misconduct. So for countries like China, for example, they will see a very high tariff rate because they've engaged in the most egregious conduct that threatens our national security. For countries that have severe but not as severe misconduct, they'll see a moderate but not as high tariff rate. The effect, though, of those global tariffs will be that companies will have to move their production back into the United States. So factories will leave, whether it be Mexico or Canada or Vietnam or Cambodia or China or the European Union. They will come back to the United States to produce their products, to make their goods. And in so doing, yes, it will create jobs. Yes, it will increase revenues. But most importantly, it will restore our national security so that we will not be dependent on anyone else to survive and thrive as a nation.
Meanwhile, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has labeled U.S. President Donald Trump's 20% tariff on the EU a major blow to the global economy. She said its consequences will be dire for millions of people. Groceries, transport and medicines will cost more, she says, and this is hurting in particular the most vulnerable citizens. She acknowledged the world trading system has serious deficiencies and said the EU is ready to negotiate with the US, but is also prepared to respond with countermeasures.
President Trump's announcement of universal tariffs on the whole world, including the European Union, is a major blow to the world economy. I deeply regret this choice. Let's be clear-eyed about the immense consequences. The global economy will massively suffer. Uncertainty will spiral and trigger the rise of further protectionism. The consequences will be dire for millions of people around the globe, also for the most vulnerable countries, which are now subject to some of the highest US tariffs, the opposite of what we wanted to achieve. The tariffs will also hurt consumers around the world. It will be felt immediately. Millions of citizens will face higher grocery bills. Medication will cost more, as well as transportation. Inflation will go up. And this is hurting in particular the most vulnerable citizens. All businesses, big and small, will suffer from day one. From greater uncertainty, to the disruption of supply chains, to burdensome bureaucracy, the costs of doing business with the United States will drastically increase. And what is more, there seems to be no order in the disorder, no clear path through the complexity and chaos that is being created as all US trading partners are hit.
Our Washington correspondent Maria Bird joins us now. She's been monitoring reactions on the ground. Maria, the markets did open low today in the U.S. Aren't they feeling liberated enough?
You are exactly correct, and I'm glad to be with you. You're correct. The markets are opening lower. What we're seeing is that there is, I'm not sure about liberation, but people now know exactly what is to expect. I think that there is a little bit of concern. I don't think people were expecting to see the individual tariffs on country by country. Some probably saw the board that the president brought out to show tariffs that countries had on the U.S. and then the tariffs that were planned for those countries. The U.S. has moved in quite a way over the past few decades, to be honest, with global trade expansion. And so many companies are concerned as to how this will impact their companies, how it will impact their bottom line, how it will impact their retail sales. And so that's where you're going to see lower with the stock market yesterday. It was able to get a little bit higher than expected, but that was before the tariff announcement. So we'll see how the recovery goes over the next few days. The biggest concern is really going to be around the economic stability.
Recovery, that's the word everyone is trying to find comfort with right now, Maria. But a minimum base level of 10% in many countries is what President Donald Trump has announced, including the UK. And Trump describes this as kind retaliatory tariffs. But are they kind, though?
Well, many Americans would, I don't know if they would use the word kind. I think that this is a much different position that the president is taking than have previous administrations. I think the real concern is that what is this going to do for a lot of the businesses in the United States depend heavily on products coming from the UK, depend heavily on products coming from China very specifically, and other parts of the Asian region. And so I think that's really, if we're going to have delay potentially in being able to have product produced because we won't get the product rate, the cost, and those costs will obviously then impact the consumer, which could then obviously in turn impact the company's bottom line, the ability to be able to be sustainable. So you mentioned recovery. I think that's the real question. So Americans will need to see these go into effect immediately. So it shouldn't take but a few weeks to see what the
Oh, Maria, hope you're still with us. Now, the only country not raising hell over what is being going on, of course, is the UK. The Prime Minister is still insisting on a calm approach. He's also calling for negotiations towards America. Does the UK have Brexit benefit over other EU countries? The fact that they're no longer a member of the organization, does that give them some leverage in the sense that they won't just slap 10% of tariffs and not higher numbers like the other EU countries?
Yes, the UK is definitely in a different position. The UK has traditionally been a friend of the United States, as we know, a trade partner of the United States. I think that, as you mentioned, they are now not in alignment with the EU, which could potentially create some longer-standing, challenges with the EU. But I think the UK will end up faring out pretty well throughout this process, specifically as we look to see what the type of trade agreements will be moving forward.
But why does the U.S. have a problem with EU trade?
EU has been a trade partner. Obviously, there's quite a large percentage of countries that are incorporated within the EU. Most importantly, right now, as we look at the challenges in the Middle East, as we look at those countries who might not always align with the president's stand on the Middle East trade and in the Middle East challenges that exist, specifically as you look at Israel and Palestine. That's one of the areas we have to be clear to note that as well. And we know that there is a war in the position that some countries have taken as it relates to Ukraine, and specifically where their role is with Russia. And we know the U.S. has become a lot more in alignment and supportive in the area of Russia than it has in years past.
Maria, this changes the current global economic order that was created by the United States. Will the new tariff regime be a great advantage to the U.S. in a short while? And how soon can we really begin to see these changes?
These changes will happen pretty immediately. I think that we're going to begin to see the changes not only as we think about where the stock market is seeing challenge, but also in consumer pricing. That's, I think, where the real concern is when we talk about the prices of things, which is where many economists are concerned about recession. We've been trying to avoid the word recession for quite some time. We know that this is not a new conversation here in the United States, but I think it's one that people are seriously looking at. But the president states that this will be something that will allow for recovery, and that the U.S., as he stated in the tariff announcement, that the U.S. will become one of the wealthiest countries once again.
We'll wait and see. Maria, thanks again for joining us. We're not moving away from the U.S. just yet. The major changes in the federal government is creating hesitation and even fear among many Americans. Senator Cory Booker from New Jersey took a stand earlier this week to share his opinion. The letters and concerns his office has received from Americans from across the country. Maria sent this in earlier.
The day before the U.S. President Donald Trump made the historic tariff announcements, Senator Cory Booker took on an act of what many are calling an act of political stamina, as he made history and filibustered the floor of the Senate for 25 hours.
Very sore and weary and tired, but I'm enormously grateful for a lot of folks who sent me their very, very personal stories. It gave me a chance to speak to the pain, hurt, fear, anger, demands of a lot of Americans. I'm so grateful to a lot of my colleagues and a lot of the help that people gave.
We do apologize. We'll be bringing that report as soon as we can. But thousands of German auto workers staged a warning strike in Nuremberg on Wednesday, escalating tensions after employers rejected union demands for a 6.5% wage increase and improved working conditions. The protests, organized by the powerful IG Metall union, saw employees from BMW, Mercedes-Benz, Daimler, truck brandishing signs and chanting slogans demanding better pay and working conditions. The warning strikes come amid further uncertainty in the automotive industry in Germany, following the latest round of negotiations in which employers rejected the 6.5% wage increase. The latest warning strikes will see workers from car dealerships, including branches of Mercedes-Benz, BMW, Daimler Truck, refusing to go to work from Tuesday to Thursday. Walkouts, which began on Tuesday, will idle workers at car dealerships and factories through the whole of today. IG Metall, representing 3.9 million workers, is also pushing for a relief component, allowing employees to choose between extra pay or additional leave. On the contrary, employers claim the poor economic situation and rising costs make it difficult to accept the workers' demands. Hungary is withdrawing from the International Criminal Court, according to the government. A senior official in Prime Minister Viktor Orban's government confirmed this hours after Israel's leader, Benjamin Netanyahu, who is sought under the ICC arrest warrant, arrived in Hungary for a state visit. Orban had invited Netanyahu as soon as the warrant was issued last November, saying the ruling would have no effect in his country. In November, ICC judges said there were reasonable grounds that Netanyahu bore criminal responsibility for alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity during the war between Israel and Hamas. Netanyahu has condemned the ICC's decision as anti-Semitic. The ICC, a global court, has the authority to prosecute those accused of genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. Serbian President Alexander Vučić and UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy shared opposing views on the ongoing political turmoil in Bosnia and Herzegovina as the two politicians held a presser in Belgrade on Wednesday. Regarding the issue, David Lammy cited the unconstitutional actions of Republika SRPSKA President Milorad Dodik as one of his major concerns in the Balkan region, while Vučić had a different stance. Vučić also urged the international community to find a compromise to the crisis, and that blaming the Serbian side had become customary since the 90s. Dodik met with Vladimir Putin in Moscow earlier this week, while Bosnia has demanded an international arrest warrant. Last month, the Sarajevo-based court found Dodik guilty of criminal conduct and sentenced him to a year in prison after he clashed with the High Representative for Bosnia and Herzegovina, Christian Schmidt, who was appointed to oversee the Dayton Agreement. Bosnian officials claimed the Republika laws had violated parts of the peace agreement, which bound the two regions under joint institutions.
A stable and secure Western Balkans matters to us today, and Serbia plays a fundamental role in delivering that stability. These memorandums of understanding shows our ambitions to do more together. We're stepping up efforts to crack down on organised crime. Our agreement today means we can better disrupt the gangs profiting from smuggling vulnerable people. Regional tensions, of course, make this harder. We've begun to discuss my concerns, President Dodik's unconstitutional actions, and how we reinvigorate the Kosovo-Serbia normalization. We have also begun to discuss recent developments here in Serbia. I've seen, of course, the huge protests since the tragedy in Novi Sad, and I offer heartfelt condolences to all who lost loved ones. This is a conversation between Serbia's government and its citizens, exercising their right to peaceful protest.
Former Ghanaian Minister for Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration, Honorable Shirley Ayoko Botchwey, has assumed office as Secretary General of the Commonwealth Office, pledging to advance the values of the Commonwealth chapter at a time of growing global tensions and shifting alliances. Botchwey succeeded Patricia Scotland, whose 9-year term ended in March. She's the first African woman, the second African overall, to lead the association of 56 countries, which make up a third of the world's population and more than a quarter of the United Nations membership. Speaking at the Commonwealth Secretariat's headquarters in London on April 1st, 2025, the Secretary General acknowledged the scale of the challenges confronting the world.
Societies seek. Trade and investment hold the key to our economic transformation. By seeing the Commonwealth market as a key to expanding industrialization, trade and services for all our countries, industrialized or developing, big or small, we can unlock extraordinary opportunities, driving prosperity, creating jobs, and lifting up communities. I am determined that we will continue to empower our women and young people with the tools, knowledge, and opportunities they need to succeed. Closing the digital gap means opening doors to education, healthcare, and economic opportunity. It is also the moment for innovation and strategic partnerships, especially with the private sector and research institutions, in the face of the greatest challenge of our times, climate change. For so many of our member states, the impacts are already devastating. Our response must be bold, urgent, smart, and united for a green and just future. And we must work together with other multilateral bodies to transform the international financial system, taking into account the critical issues of climate and other vulnerabilities. Let me conclude on a personal note. It is a great honor to be the first African woman to serve as Secretary General. As a daughter of Ghana, the first African country to join the Commonwealth, I feel a deep personal connection to our family of nations. As I take on this role, I do so with profound optimism and unwavering belief in what we can achieve together. With the support of our team at the Secretariat, drawn from all across the Commonwealth, I will work every day to honor and repay the trust and confidence which has been placed in me. The challenges we face are real and serious, but together we are more than equal to them. Sustained by the values that bind us, democracy, good governance, peace, human rights, and equal opportunity for all, we will build a future in which opportunity, dignity, and prosperity are within reach for all. So let us move forward with purpose, with courage, and with an unshakable commitment to a Commonwealth that truly thrives together.
Let's check in with relief efforts going on in Myanmar. Global aid bodies are warning extreme heat and heavy rain in the country could cause disease outbreaks. Among earthquake survivors camping in the open, the weather conditions are complicating rescue efforts made difficult by a civil war. This is even as the death toll now has surpassed 3,000. Deaths rose to 3,085 as at today, with over 4,000 people injured, 341 still missing. Many earthquake-hit areas have yet to be reached by authorities, meaning the death toll figures could likely accelerate. Last Friday's 7.7 magnitude earthquake, one of Myanmar's strongest in the century, jolted a region home to 28 million people, toppling buildings such as hospitals, flattening communities, leaving many without food, water, and shelter. Meanwhile, Myanmar's junta chief Min Aung Hlaing is in Thailand for a regional summit as his country reels from the earthquake. Mr. Hlaing arrived in Bangkok earlier today on the eve of a summit that will gather leaders of the 7 countries that border the Bay of Bengal. Host Thailand, where the earthquake was felt, killed 21 people, has proposed that the leaders issue a joint statement on the disaster. Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal, Sri Lanka are also part of the summit. Well, here in Lagos, Nigeria, people still reeling from the physical and mental impact of a traffic gridlock Wednesday that brought the city to a standstill, especially on the Lagos Island area. A closure of a major bridge called the Independence Bridge has called the attention of the state governor, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, and the Minister of Works, David Umahi, to visit the area.
Victoria Island is locked down closing hours on Wednesday as a result of the partial closure of the Independence Bridge. The closure was announced by the federal government of works for urgent repairs. Motorists traveling from Ahmadu Bello and Adeola Odeku inwards Marina, Eko Bridge, Onikon and its environs were on standstill for several hours, affecting economic activities. Some residents who plied the route share their concerns, while others commend the authorities for swinging into action.
I was coming from Lekki to 1004 Estate. I take more than 4 hours to reach 1004 estate yesterday, and now I just want to go to Semes to get some material to do my work, and I have to trek from 1004 to this body camp now. I'm looking to get towards TBS, whether I can get a bus. You can see how I'm sweating.
If they can make this other lane a two-way drive, so everyone don't have to use the access road, I mean, it will solve a lot of problems.
Our maintenance culture is not there. But now this is what we really want. They maintain the road as of when due, so that it will not cause havoc.
The situation has prompted the Lagos State Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu to visit the area and apologize to citizens for the ugly situation. But he says the road cannot be reopened until the rehabilitation work is complete.
This apology is important so that we can take full responsibility as a government, both at the national and sub-national level, for just taking our citizens through an unfortunate incident. Given what they've done in the past 2 days, in my view, and from engineering conversation, makes it difficult to reverse it. So one of the things that we're going to see very quickly is that they're going to advance the work very quickly. They'll probably be working into the night, and to see how they can reduce the timeline from the 6-7 weeks that they are planned to about 4 to 5 weeks.
He's appealing to the people to plan their movement to reduce gridlock.
Over the years, erosion has gone underneath and is sitting on nothing. So that is indeed an engineering disaster that is just waiting to happen. If you don't have a business to do in Victoria Land in the next 2 to 3 weeks, conduct your business via social media, via telephone, via meetings, Zoom meetings and online meetings, and plan ahead.
The state has also made arrangements for security operatives to be on ground to ensure safety of commuters.
He needs us to deploy more men than we deployed yesterday, and that is actually what they have done today. I want to assure you that I don't think it will never happen like that again, because we have enough men around the site and all across the state controlling the traffic, so that there will be no gridlock again.
The Minister of Works, David Umahi, who had earlier ordered the reopening of the bridge following widespread complaints about traffic congestion, also visits Lagos to see the situation of things at the Independence Bridge.
So what we are doing now is to restore the bridge temporarily within the next 3 days. By Sunday, this place will be totally open. And then after 2 weeks, we will look at the settlement, and then we will take out 3 days to put the permanent structure. We are going to vary the design. The design will be varied according to the emergency situation we've had on ground, and the contractor is going to cooperate with us. I'm not going until the bridge is fully restored by Monday.
Motorists have been advised to use alternative routes provided by the state government and also cooperate with traffic management personnel on ground to ease movements.
Hopefully this next story is able to cheer you up wherever you're watching, hopefully not in traffic. But some cheering news now as a 15-year-old special needs child, Kanyeyachukwu Tagbo Okeke, has set a Guinness Book of Records for painting the largest painting on canvas. He did this in Abuja. Take a look.
The Eagle Square in the nation's capital comes alive as Nigeria joins the international community to mark the 2025 Autism Day. The day is set aside by the United Nations to raise awareness about autism. Established in 2007, the day focuses on understanding, acceptance and inclusion of individuals with autism around the globe. This year, a 15-year-old Kanyeyachukwu Tagbo Okeke, who has done well for himself in painting, is showcasing his masterpiece, a 12,303 square meters painting. His target, the World Guinness Book of Records.
Kanye really speaks to the success of what Nigeria is and what we can really open up the potential within the creative industry.
The theme for World Autism Awareness Day 2025 is advancing neurodiversity and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. This theme highlights the connection between neurodiversity and global sustainability initiatives the First Lady, Mrs. Remi Tinubu, assures of in a press statement. The statement reads, "I encourage all Nigerians to embrace neurodiversity, advocate for inclusion and work together to create a society where every individual has the opportunity to excel." End of quote. At this event, speeches from members of the international community assure of continuous support for autistic children.
I think everybody has a role in the society to play, a role in support on the realization of children's rights. In the case of children who have disabilities.
Dignitaries stepped up to honor the champion after the Guinness Book of Records recognized this painting as the largest canvas painting in the world. He is surrounded by his parents, his grandfather and friends.
We knew we would do it, and to the glory of God, we're done. I'm exhausted. I'll tell you the truth, I'm really exhausted because for the past 3-4 months, we've been planning and preparing and prepping Kanye, making sure that he's up to, he has everything that he needs.
Autism spectrum disorder is a condition related to brain development that impacts how a person perceives and socializes with others. With social inclusion and acceptance, however, persons living with the challenge can thrive and do better in the society.
That is just so heartwarming to watch. Thanks for watching The World Today. I'm Amarachi Ubane. Before we go, we'd like to remind our viewers on the DSTV platform, coming up at 6 o'clock is a special documentary on Zamfara State urban renewal. It will only be for our DSTV viewers. Stay with us.